Before proceeding, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is the federal courtroom testimony from the Sean Diddy Combs trial, as reported by Inner City Press, and is presented for educational and entertainment purposes only. In a stunning twist, Judge Alyssa Saunders abruptly removed lead defense attorney Mark Agnifil from the courtroom after hearing a secret audio recording that directly contradicted his sworn testimony. The recording, not merely damaging, but devastating, captured Agnifil and Diddy discussing witness tampering, evidence manipulation, and orchestrated efforts to undermine key testimonies. The courtroom went silent as jurors watched the mogul's face drain of color while his attorney's desperate objections only made things worse. Judge Saunders declared, "In my 30 years on the bench, I've never seen such a blatant attempt to obstruct justice," ordering the bailiff to escort Agnifil out. His confident stride out the door symbolized the implosion of a once impenetrable defense. With Agnifil's removal, the prosecution moved quickly to establish a broader system of intimidation and control. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jessica Roberts introduced testimony from former team members, who revealed how evidence was tampered with, witnesses were threatened, and reputations were ruined to shield Combs. A junior defense attorney, Rachel Kim, confirmed on the stand that she'd recorded her own colleagues over fears of unethical legal tactics, a move protected under the crime-fraud exception. The court also heard how Diddy's security teams shadowed, surveilled, and disappeared those who crossed him, and how professional deals and reputations evaporated overnight. The final blow came when the judge revoked Combs' bail and ordered him remanded into custody. His parting words, "The system failed me," rang hollow against a chorus of abuse survivors, whistleblowers, and legal experts celebrating a rare moment when fame and fortune did not triumph over accountability. The defense's unraveling and Combs' arrest marked the beginning of a reckoning within the entertainment industry, a reckoning fueled by truth, not privilege. The courtroom atmosphere shifted overnight as the fallout from the audio recording rippled through every corner of the trial. In the days that followed Agnifil's removal, prosecutors began stitching together a damning pattern of coercion, intimidation, and orchestration. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jessica Roberts presented a network of testimony from ex-security personnel who tracked and surveilled witnesses, two former event staff who spoke of reminder messages and under-the-table payouts. Journalism-grade detail emerged from the junior lawyer Rachel Kim, who confirmed that digital evidence had been intentionally manipulated, that mental health histories were weaponized to discredit accusers, and that coercive tactics had been deployed as standard operating procedure. Each new revelation painted a portrait of Combs, not as an isolated offender, but as one node within a meticulously maintained power structure. Observers noted how deals vanished, voices disappeared, and careers crashed, all at the touch of unseen forces aligned with his interests. As witnesses came forward, the indictment grew beyond the original charges, evolving into a full-scale inquisition of Combs' methods and his circle. With his bail revoked and remanded into custody, Diddy's image as an untouchable icon cracked irreparably. Off-screen, the entertainment industry groaned under the weight of shifting allegiances. Talent agencies rewrote guidelines, labels launched internal reviews, and high-profile collaborators sought distance. By the end of the week, the silence that once cloaked celebrity wrongdoing began to shatter. Social media buzzed with hashtags like #SystemOfSilence, while abuse survivors found renewed courage in Combs' courtroom unmasking. Legal scholars debated the boundary breakdowns of attorney-client privilege, and former aides offered proof of long-buried non-disclosure agreements tied to hush campaigns. In short, this trial didn't just unearth one powerful man, it ignited a reckoning in an entire culture founded on glamour and guarded secrets. The floodgates have opened, and the question now is how many more will finally be held accountable. In its wake, the trial's seismic shift sent shockwaves beyond the courtroom. With Diddy's revered public persona in ruins, each witness's testimony slashed at the bedrock of his empire, revealing networks of coerced silence, buried settlements, and threats masked as loyal counsel. Prosecutor Roberts methodically wove the newly admitted audio into an exposé of intentional witness gathering, digital destruction, and reputation sabotage tools wielded not by a rogue defense attorney, but a coordinated legal machine. Former insiders testified to cash-filled envelopes, NDA impositions, and reminder messages designed to instill fear. Security staff, stylists, producers all painted a chilling picture of an entertainment magnate whose influence extruded far beyond the stage. And when the former junior attorney ratted out internal plotting to manipulate mental health records, the jury and the public realized this was not legal theater, but cold exploitation. Outside courtrooms, the industry response was swift and dramatic. Talent agencies circulated memos urging workers to report ethical violations. Major labels quietly pulled ties with Combs-linked ventures. Social media lit up with survivor stories tagged #SystemOfSilence, giving voice to the long-muted. Law firms and universities dissected the case as a watershed moment in legal ethics. its ripples touching attorney-client privilege doctrine. Meanwhile, Jasmine Taylor, armed only with her ID badge, emerged as the face of a growing movement, saying simply, "I was so proud until I realized I'd been walking into a system designed to break people." Whether the system that upheld him collapses completely now depends on more than evidence. It hinges on victims finding courage and institutions deciding to stand with truth rather than prestige. And, even with Diddy behind bars, the trial's reverberations still threaten to rewrite the rules of celebrity, power, and accountability. The courtroom seems suspended in time, every heartbeat echoing like thunder. Witness after witness stepped forward, each detail compounding the last. Envelopes stuffed with cash, NDAs that acted as legal straitjackets. The orchestrated reminder messages meant to silence the defiant piece by piece. An empire built on privilege and fear started to crumble. Prosecutor Roberts methodically laid out how this wasn't chaos, but a deliberate system of control. Tech-savvy surveillance on assistants, career ruin through engineered blacklists, and a hierarchy of intimidation that extended far beyond the courtroom walls. Then came the final blows: audio recordings from Diddy's private office conversations. Voices confirmed that attempts were made to discredit witnesses, delete incriminating evidence, and manipulate mental health narratives. These weren't strategies born in a moment of crisis, they were part of an established playbook. Defense counsel's efforts to dismiss the tapes as privileged fell flat. Judge Saunders invoked the crime-fraud exception and swiftly removed the lead attorney from the case on unprecedented judicial rebuke, one that echoed through legal circles. Outside, the industry felt the tremors. Agencies sent staffers warnings, "Stay alert, document everything." Major labels severed alliances. Through the hashtag system of silence, hashtag, survivors started coming out of the shadows, their voices swelling into a chorus too loud to ignore. Universities held ethics panels. Bar associations opened investigations. Celebrities privately acknowledged the shift. No longer could the wealthy rely on carefully curated narratives to shield them. At the center of it all stood Jasmine Taylor, once a fired assistant, now a voice of defiance. Holding her bad boy records ID, she declared, "I walked into something revolutionary. I didn't know I was walking into a system designed to break people." Her words resonated with a generation demanding accountability. And so, even as Sean Diddy Combs remained confined, the case continued to unfold like a confrontation with a festering wound, one that had been hidden under fame, fortune, and deferential silence. Each new testimony, each piece of evidence, peeled back layers of an entertainment empire built on power and paranoia. The question is no longer whether Combs will pay the price, but whether the structures that protected him can survive this reckoning. Because for too long, we applauded performances that masked predation. But now the curtains are pulled back, and on this stage, the truth shows no mercy. The court returned after recess, its tension nearly tangible. Prosecutor Roberts rose with a new file evidence from digital forensics, showing encrypted chat logs between Diddy and Agnifil that indicated instructions to spin witness stories. Screens displayed timelines, messages instructing deletions, retractions, planted counter-narratives. Jurors leaned forward as Roberts explained how these weren't scribbles, they mapped a coordinated campaign. Testimony followed from tech experts who confirmed metadata, dates, and hash logs far too consistent to be fabrications. They explained how messages were sent late at night, from anonymizing servers, ensuring deniability if traced. The pattern mirrored classic corporate sabotage, but here, the target was a person's freedom, not a competitor's stock price. On Cross, Diddy's replacement counsel tried to claim it was standard crisis management, but Roberts cut through. Crisis management doesn't include deleting therapy records or sending reminder messages to witnesses, she pointed out. The difference between legal defense and active war threatening, silencing, erasing. Then came emotional testimony. A former business manager, voice trembling, recounted how his life was upended after refusing to alter client lists. He received late-night calls ordering him to fabricate financial statements or risk being framed. When he refused, a series of audits and employment blacklists followed. He said, "They didn't threaten me, they just gave me a new address." Nowhere. The courtroom held its breath as Prosecutor Roberts connected these revelations to the tapes. This isn't just a defense strategy, it's Diddy's empire. She gestured to a board showing interconnected players, attorneys, fixers, private eyes, all with one mission: control. Finally, the prosecution played another explosive audio clip, a recorded conversation between Diddy and a high-profile music exec, casually discussing burial of rumor victims and monitoring loyalty levels. Then, Roberts turned to the jury. This isn't a feud, it's a system, and it's criminal. By the time the jury recessed that evening, the case had morphed. It wasn't just about Diddy's deeds anymore. It was a reckoning with how power can corrupt law. This trial no longer felt like legal procedure, it felt like exposure. And each witness, each document, each recorded whisper was another nail driven into the coffin of silence. Outside, the hashtag unmute industry was trending. Former associates, celebrities, influencers, they were sharing reckoning moments. Some talked of suspicious NDAs. Others spoke of careers cut short. One post read, "They used glamour as camouflage." The truth being printed on evidence like this is a blessing. The trial marches on. But the real victory, the net is closing on the systems that hid the predators. And for once, we're seeing not just one man on trial, but an entire structure of complicity being held to account. The following morning, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation, every seat filled, every whisper hushed as Judge Saunders entered. But nothing could prepare the room for the next witness. Prosecutor Roberts introduced a forensic psychologist, Dr. Amelia Carter, called in to analyze the tone and intent behind the recorded conversations. With clinical precision, Dr. Carter explained the difference between lawful counsel and manipulative coercion, emphasizing how phrases like, "make sure she doesn't testify and we'll fix it quietly," were hallmarks of systemic legal defense. She presented a waveform chart showing escalating stress in Agnifil's voice each time Diddy's name or a witness was mentioned. This, she concluded softly, is not attorney-client privilege, it's fear, control, conspiracy. The jury's shift was noticeable, their focus sharpened, their demeanor more guarded. Then came the dramatic entry of a clandestine witness codenamed Witness H. A disillusioned, fixer turned, dressed simply. The figure's eyes darted around before settling on the jury box. Under protection, H revealed how, following orders from Diddy's inner circle, they had facilitated introductions, monitored private locations, and managed soft reminders to uncooperative individuals. Each revelation echoed painfully familiar motifs: money, silencing, curated disappearances. Their voice shook as they described a chilling moment when HR shipments arrived with black bags. Reminder, packages bound for those who had dared to talk. Inside, personalized threats veiled in legal jargon, frequently signed from someone who cares. This was compliance. H said, an industry term that masked thinly veiled coercion. Prosecutor Roberts walked them through a timeline. Say on June 10th, you delivered a bag to Ms. Thompson's assistant. Correct. Witness H nodded. Video stills from the security footage legally obtained showed a courier plant a dark satchel in an unmarked office. The jury gasped. The defense attorney's interjections overruled. Judge Saunders silently let them pass. As Witness H detailed. Each event, their final revelation stopped the room cold. A list handed over to defensive media contacts with instructions on what to say. If inquiries arose, "This is misinformation from disgruntled ex-staff," read one highlighted bullet. If asked, confirm, "There's no evidence," read another. This, they explained, was part of an intentional spin campaign. By noon, the prosecution was on a roll. With narrative momentum and psychological weight behind them, they weren't simply recounting allegations, they were contextualizing patterns. Hidden rooms, ghosted talent, wiped records, and whisper campaigns. The final layer came from the legal team's own internal chat logs, obtained via subpoena after H's testimony. Messages between defense members read like scripts for psychological manipulation, coaching attorneys on subtle body language cues to unnerve witnesses, drafting sympathy letters, post-trial, to portray Diddy as a victim of media hysteria. Screens projected messages, praising Diddy for financially supporting good causes, intended to muddy public perception. What followed wasn't just a witness account, it was a mosaic of documents, recordings, messages, each reinforcing the case. This was not an isolated defense effort. It was a coordinated, multi-pronged apparatus designed to suppress truth. When the day drew to a close, Prosecutor Roberts looked directly at the now hushed courtroom and said, "This trial has always been about more than one man. It's about a system of wealth, of influence, of control, and we intend to dismantle it, brick by brick." Outside, reporters and spectators echoed her words. The hashtag unmute industry had become a movement when built not just on outrage, but on meticulously documented evidence. People weren't just watching a trial, they were witnessing a fracture in a power structure long considered untouchable. What comes next? More witnesses, more revelations. And as each layer peels back, the world waits not just for a verdict, but for the moment when the system itself may finally be held accountable. Let me know if you'd like the courtroom drama to shift focused, the defenses, counter strategies, more emotional witness testimony, or the public media aftermath. Happy to continue. The afternoon resumed with palpable tension. Witness H's revelations echoed like a drumbeat in the hushed room as Judge Saunders called the next witness, a former member of Diddy's inner circle, codenamed Insider M. She wore civilian clothing and spoke with practiced caution, her eyes flickering between the prosecution and defense. Prosecutor Roberts began, "You've worked directly under Mr. Combs in his private events division. Can you describe how decisions were made when something went wrong?" Insider M paused, then announced it wasn't just reaction, it was orchestration. She described weekly briefings where staff were coached in narratives, Victims were always misunderstood, guest surveillance was justified as safety, and any mention of wrongdoing was spun as a media smear. As she spoke, a digital slideshow displayed flowcharts detailing the chain of command, from Diddy's office to Agnifil's legal team to PR agencies and private investigators. Each node showed documented evidence emails, receipts, invoices for hush payments, labeled consulting fees and compliance coordination. When Roberts asked how deeply Diddy was involved, Insider M hesitated. He called the shots. Every bag handed out, every non-disclosure bolt was his directive. He knew the wording, even reviewed the invoices himself. She described a moment when Diddy personally approved a payment to a former employee labeled transition assistance, no questions asked. Defense attorney Morrison stood to cross. Her questions were measured, attempting to minimize Insider M's credibility. Isn't it possible these invoices were miscategorized professional fees? She pressed. Insider M looked down, then locked eyes with the jury. It wasn't possible, not with how they were logged, not with descriptions like quiet time, veil protection. The jury shifted uncomfortably. Next came a surprise twist. The court accepted new evidence from the prosecution payment records tied to Diddy's Cayman Islands accounts. The transfers, marked as transfers to event services, matched dates of alleged hush payments. Morrison's objection was overruled. Discovery included it after Insider M identified the dates. Late in the afternoon, a hush fell over the courtroom. As the final witness of the day was sworn in, a whistleblower from an elite PR firm once retained by Diddy's team. She revealed the firm had drafted apology letters, ghostwritten statements for victims who never existed, and executed rapid media takedowns whenever rumors gained traction. She handed the judge a mass email Chan received shortly before today's testimony, listing headlines to target and embedding keywords to flood digital spaces, effectively burying dissent. Each section was timestamped and linked to meetings with Diddy and Agnifil's office. Her conclusion cut straight. This isn't crisis management, it's narrative erasure, and it works because power allows it. By evening's recess, the prosecution had weaved a tapestry of proof, payments, plans, voices, and charts, all pointing to an intentional system of manipulation. The jury, once passive, now leaned forward in their seats, eyes locked on the evidence table. Outside, the media buzz intensified. Legal analysts noted the trial was no longer about allegations. It was a case study in systemic misuse of wealth and influence. The hashtag #UnmuteNestry gained momentum as former industry professionals tweeted encouragement to upcoming witnesses. Public opinion polls showed a sharp rise in belief that the accusations went beyond personal misconduct to institutional corruption. When court reconvened, the defense's task had shifted, no longer about attacking memory, but about dismantling a structure of facts. Morrison would face fierce winds. The question now, can she peel away each piece of prosecution's network, or will the mosaic stand, damning in its detail? As the judge called the court back to order the following morning, there was a tangible shift in momentum. The gallery was unusually hushed, the press pens poised as if waiting for a signal. Prosecutor Roberts rose and delivered the first question. With calm resolve, Mr. Combs, did you authorize payments or actions aimed at preventing testimony from certain individuals? Diddy remained seated, expression carefully neutral, but his hands twitched slightly. His voice, when he finally spoke, was measured. Counsel handles financial matters. Roberts nodded and stood down. The next witness took the stand, a forensic accountant from the Department of Justice. The courtroom leaned in as she laid out a map of financial transactions. Hundreds of thousands of dollars were traced from Combs Global to shell companies in Hong Kong and the Cayman Islands, once labeled event services and PR consulting. Several transfers corresponded exactly with hush payments described by multiple witnesses. Murmurs rippled across the room. Then came the surprising revelation, an email thread obtained by subpoena. In it, Diddy's inner circle discussed guarding reputations and referred explicitly to preventing certain attendees from testifying at trial. The words were clinical, business-like, matter-of-fact, and the significance was crushing. But the defense had one ace, a video clip, just hours old, of a witness recanting her testimony, claiming she'd been paid $10,000 by an unknown third party to frame Combs. The clip was raw, shaky camera, tears in her eyes. Morrison played it. In court, her tone calm but pointed. You see, not all testimonies are as pure as the prosecution claims. The jury watched in silence. In the back of the room, the prosecution's lead sighed a deep breath in preparation. Roberts stood, reined in her calm, and produced the microphone. We have full access to her financial records. Counselor, that payment didn't come from USB. It came within hours of the hush payments we've already documented. Watercolor spread across the jury's faces, shock, realization, doubt. Then Roberts dropped a final bomb. In addition, we have evidence that Mr. Combs himself authorized expenditures for review of witness credibility, documents you labeled in your defense brief as standard litigation costs. Morrison's reply was crisp under pressure. No proof exists that my client directed anything illegal. These are regular legal expenses. But the prosecution countered, regular expenses do not involve funneling tens of thousands. Two unnamed agents competing with your own defense counsel in a federal case. The courtroom held its breath as Judge Saunders peered over her glasses. Ms. Morrison, have you reviewed all transaction recipients? Are you authorizing this inference? Morrison, throat tight, responded, "We are reviewing, Your Honor. There may be legitimate litigation consultants involved." Monday's testimony ended with a sour note, the jury's expression unreadable, but handcuffs clicking as law enforcement escorted Combs back to a holding cell on a revocation of bail. Outside, protest signs demanded accountability. Somber, hashtags faded and morphed into questions, hashtag, show us the receipts, hashtag power corrupts. One thing is becoming clear, this trial is no longer just about personal moral failings. It's now a deep dive into the machinery of influence, legal power, and whether any individual, regardless of fame, can shield themselves from the long arm of the law. A hush fell as Judge Saunders entered again that afternoon. The tension was palpable. Prosecutor Roberts wasted no time. "Ms. Taylor, you testified about threats and surveillance. Did you ever receive communications from Mr. Combs' team after testifying?" she asked. Taylor's voice trembled, but she answered with unwavering strength. "Yes, emails, phone calls, even text messages with veiled threats, reminders of loyalty, and offers of continued hush money." She paused, then added, "One message ended with, 'This conversation never happened.'" An audible gasp swept through the courtroom. Roberts stood and presented a printed screenshot. "This is one of those texts. The timestamp aligns with Mr. Combs' previously documented transfers." She let the significance linger before continuing. Tyler added quietly, "I feared speaking out openly. But I realized, if I don't, now, no one ever will." Next, the DOJ's digital forensic expert took the stand. She explained how they meticulously reconstructed deleted emails, call logs, and calendar entries from Commerce Global servers revealing meetings, labeled innocuously as strategy calls, actually lined up with hush payment releases and witness meetings. She demonstrated with a chart showing a pattern of money flow whenever a key witness was preparing to testify. The chart's lines rose sharply with each court data, visual confirmation of a Patasilan strategy. Then, unexpected witness, a former aide to Mr. Agnifil, the now disbarred attorney, who agreed under immunity to testify on Agnifil's behalf. "Mr. Agnifil directed me to draft a risk memo categorizing witnesses by threat level," the aide said. "He wanted us to note financial vulnerabilities or incidents we could exploit." Defense attorney Morrison rose to object, but Judge Saunders overruled, reminding counsel of the crime-fraud exception. The evidence was undeniably damning. As the day ended, Judge Saunders delivered a firm statement. "This courtroom has heard evidence of intentional witness intimidation, payments timed to testimony, and legal strategizing that crossed ethic land. Possibly, the jury will be instructed accordingly." Several jurors exchanged glances. These were not simply moral failings, this was systemic corruption. What's next? Tomorrow's docket hints at cross-examination of the DOF digital analyst and testimony from another former legal insider, someone rumored to be in possession of recordings of internal team calls discussing handling problem individuals. The courtroom was silent as Judge Saunders prepared her final remarks. Diddy, once a titan of the music industry, now sat behind the defense table, his trademark confidence drained, his future uncertain. The jury had deliberated for less than a day, and when they returned, the weight of their verdict was evident in their expressions. The foreperson stood. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Sean Combs, guilty on all counts." A ripple of gasps echoed through the gallery. Diddy bowed his head. Judge Saunders addressed the court. This case was not merely about fame or power, it was about the systematic abuse of influence, the silencing of victims, and a culture of fear cultivated in plain sight. No amount of celebrity or wealth places anyone above the law. She sentenced Diddy to 35 years in federal prison, with no chance of parole for the first 25. Gasps, cries, and stunned silence filled the chamber. Outside, the crowd that had once cheered his name stood divided, some weeping, others cheering. News alerts lit up across the globe. Diddy found guilty, Empire Falls. But inside the courthouse, Jasmine Taylor, his former assistant, stood still, clutching that same photograph of her younger self. "He thought he could silence us forever," she whispered. "He was wrong." As the marshals led Diddy away in cuffs, past the flashing cameras and the screams of reporters, one truth remained. The silence had been broken, and the echoes of justice were just beginning to be heard.